Well, good evening, everyone, again. Welcome to the Washington State Third Congressional District Candidate Forum, hosted by Activate Republicans, the Clark County Republican Party, and what has become my go-to place for local news, your news source with integrity, Clark County Today. My name is Joel Matala. I am the chairman of the Clark County Republican Party. I will be one of two moderators of tonight's forum. Joining me to my right is Hannah Joy, Skamania County State Committee woman, and owner of the Skamania Observer, a conservative countywide newspaper. Hannah will be screening questions that you can submit via email to, write this down, 3cdistrict@gmail.com. So 3C, like Third Congressional, 3cdistrict@gmail.com. Submit a question. She has a laptop here. They're going to pop up, and she'll be screening those questions and asking them. Kenny Vance from Clark County Today was scheduled to be with us, but he couldn't be with us because of a scheduling conflict. Also on stage with us is a young man to be our timekeeper, Josiah Joner. Give him a big hand. Josiah Joner is a Running Start student at Clark College, and he's also president of the Clark College student body. I'd like to say for the record that current Congresswoman Jaime Herrera Beutler was invited to participate in tonight's forum, but she did not respond to our invitation. We have three great candidates that did agree to appear this evening. Let's stand on our feet and welcome those three as they come forward. So with us tonight is successful local business owner, best-selling author, and champion for freedom, Heidi St. John. Retired Army Special Forces Chief Warrant Officer and Gold Star husband, Joe Kent. And former Trump administrative chief of staff of the Selective Service System, Wadi Yakhour. One of our nation's founding fathers, Edmund Burke, said, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." Welcome to you all, and thank you for stepping up to serve in this important office. I'd like to say to the audience tonight, as you listen to the candidates, I want you to consider running for an office yourself. The Republican Party is looking for great candidates from the cemetery board to the school board to the governor's mansion. So please consider running for an office yourself. Candidates, this is a very important office that you're seeking. This is your opportunity to reach a large audience both here in the building and via live stream, thanks to our partners from Clark County Today. We and the audience hope that you will give us specifics as to why you think you should earn our votes. None of the candidates have seen any of the questions that we'll be asking. And we fielded questions from the Third Congressional District leaders, the executive board of the Clark County Republican Party, and various others. The rules are as follows. You will each have 3 minutes for opening remarks, and when the questions start, you will have 2 minutes to give an answer, and if a rebuttal is needed, 30 seconds. Let's get started. Please introduce yourself and tell us why you ran for this office, and let's start with ladies first, Miss Heidi St. John.
Thank you for the invitation. We're excited to be here. And I would like to just take a moment and introduce myself. My husband, Jay, and I have been living in this district for 17 years. We've been raising 7 children here. We now have 3 grandchildren. That's 4 generations of St. John's that care very deeply about what's happening in the district here, but we also care very deeply about what's happening in our nation. I've spent the last 20 years of my life out on the road talking to audiences about why it is so important that we get off the bench and onto the battlefield. This nation is the greatest nation on the face of the earth. It is worth fighting for, and I am so thrilled to see so many of you here tonight, because what it says to us, I know to the gentleman up here with me as well, is that you are ready to engage in the battle. The left is trying to take our nation off of a cliff. We are staring socialism in the face right now. We are staring Marxism and even communism, and we must do everything that we can in our power to stand against it. We are watching the left take aim right now directly at your ability to have a free and fair election. We are watching them trying to pass the Equality Act, which is anything but equality. You'll notice that the left has stolen the language, and we have an opportunity to take the language back. And I hope that it begins tonight, that we begin to be bold and we begin to speak the truth to each other and stop being bullied by the radical left who wants to silence you, take away your freedoms, take away your liberty, and take away your guns. I have been speaking for many, many years on the topic of freedom, and I know that I can do this job. I know that I can communicate. Put me in a room with Nancy Pelosi, and that girl is going to lose. Washington State's 3rd Congressional District does not need another representative to go to Washington, D.C. and be a wallflower. Jaime Herrera Beutler, who I have supported financially in every other way for the last 10 years, has left a very small footprint. I plan to go to Washington, D.C. and leave the biggest footprint that anyone has ever left from Washington State's 3rd Congressional District. We can get things done, and we can do it in a way that moves our nation and our district forward. And by the time I'm done, I hope they say, I don't know what's going on in Washington State's 3rd Congressional, but we sure wish we had that everywhere in the nation. And that is my desire, and I'm excited to be here tonight.
Mr. Kent?
Hey, good evening, and thank you so much for coming out. So I spent 20 years in the United States Army Special Forces, a little bit of time after that in the intelligence community, and in that time, I was taught to recognize patterns and to know when I'm being attacked. And our nation right now is under attack from the left. And what the left is doing is very deliberate. They're going after our family units. They're going after our culture. They have full control of the media. They have the full control of the education system. This is a complex information war that we are in. We saw this all unfold and come to fruition in 2020 with the way that the election happened. The way that the bureaucrats and technocrats, social media, and our media moved in lockstep to take away our vote in 2020. And then they told us that we couldn't even question it. And if we did, we'd be branded as insurrectionists, fringy people, white supremacists, and a host of other derogatory terms that had consequences. And those consequences led to us being deplatformed and our ability to earn a living taken away, our ability to have access to our free speech taken away. And it's continued to codify ever since the Congress was sworn in, the Senate was sworn in, and the Democrats are in full control. H.R. 1 is extremely radical. It's trying to take away and codify 2020 and the election and the way that that went down. So seeing this complex attack on our nation, I realized that I couldn't sit on the sidelines. I served this country for over 20 years. The only reason I left government service was because my wife was killed fighting for this country in Syria. So I've been on the receiving end of failed policy. My wife would be alive right now today had the Democrats and the bureaucrats not slow-rolled President Trump in withdrawing our troops from Syria. So I know what being on the receiving end of failed policy feels like, and I don't want to let that happen to our country. So look, the only reason I'm running for Congress right now is because of my children and all of our children. Someday in the not so distant future, I'm gonna have to look my sons in the eye and explain to them that this is the nation that their mother gave her life for. And I wanna be able to say I did everything I could to stop this totalitarian grip that's creeping across our nation right now.
Mr. Yakhour.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Wadi Yakhour, and I have not yet to formally introduce myself to you. I'm a Navy veteran, a Trump appointee for the last 4 years, and a candidate for Congress in Washington's 3rd District. And if you're like me, you're tired of seeing self-serving politicians who fail to stand for their constituents and America's values. And that's one reason why I'm here today. I'm tired of it. Did anybody listen to that town hall last week? I've never felt like I've taken a time machine back to 10, 15 years ago where President Trump never happened. The Democrats aren't acting as totalitarians against our society. It's time for somebody to get in there and do something about it. I started my career when I got out of the Navy in 2014. I used my GI Bill and went to Washington State University, Vancouver. I was looking for other means to expand my professional skill sets while serving my community. And that's when I started volunteering for the Trump campaign. I volunteered 7 days a week while going to school full time, and we were building those Trump signs faster than the Democrats could tear them down. Eventually, I was hired on as full-time staff as the Western Region Communications Director. I don't have much time, so I'm going to give the fast spiel. And when we won the general, I went to Washington, D.C. to serve the administration. First as a special assistant to the United States Secretary of the Interior, and when the dust settled, I went over to Selective Service System, first as a special advisor, then as Chief of Staff of the entire agency. In that role, I have seen the ins and outs of Washington, D.C. I've worked with a full spectrum of local, of appointed and elected officials in both local and federal government. Presidential cabinet members, governors, senators, local reps, state reps, county chairs. I've worked the full spectrum. And from that, I've also managed the agency from the top, bottom, and all the mechanisms that go with it, HR, IT, budget, public affairs. So from the Navy, from my time in Washington, D.C., and from this political climate, I have been bulletproofed, and I have been torture tested to withstand this, and to come back and to serve my local community where I was born and raised in.
Thank you. Okay, candidates, many Republicans asked me to pose this question. Communication goes both ways, both to and from your constituents. How will you communicate in an effective way, including hearing from citizens to the communities that you will represent? And let's start with Mr. Kent and go down the line.
So in this day and age, with technology and everybody being very Zoom literate nowadays, there's zero excuses for not communicating with communities. So the approach I've taken so far in this campaign is I've attempted to go out to as many community events as I possibly can in every single county, and I will continue that as a congressperson. So I think being able to come and connect with people face to face is incredibly key. And if you can't communicate face to face, everybody has phones, everybody has Zooms. So the way that Representative Beutler has gone about her business as a representative for the last, 5, 6, 7 years is just completely and totally unacceptable. So I plan on having complete and total transparency with all of you when I get to Washington, D.C., because that's the key right there is Washington, D.C. is a swamp, and it will suck you in if you don't stay connected with the people that actually put you in Washington, D.C.
I like going second because I can just build on what Joe said. I think it's important. I completely agree with Joe. I think it's very important that representative government goes both ways. It's a two-way street. So we're here to represent the people. One of the things that my family and I talked about as we were praying over whether or not I would take this role is our desire to be back here in the district as much as we can. I do not plan on living in Washington, D.C. I think the job of, and it is much more difficult. You can say it's a pretty harsh commute, right? But we belong here. And I think when we move out and we stay in Washington, D.C. for indeterminate amounts of time, we lose touch with the people that are here. My grandchildren are here. My kids are here. I want to be here. I want to be where you guys are. I think it's also very important, and I agree again with Joe, that in this age of technology, there is literally no excuse. I've heard that Jaime hasn't been here in person for a town hall for almost 4 years. That's absolutely inexcusable. You are the people that we are elected to represent, and so we want to hear what you have to say, and that's going to be important to me.
So I have 3 rules for being a good representative to the community. Rule number 1, communications from my office, if elected, will be always clear, professional, and transparent. Additionally, thank you. Additionally, my office door will always be open to you. If you come and you see me, you will be greeted with a hot cup of coffee or a cold drink. We'll give you a brief on everything that we're working on, and then I want you to take that opportunity to brief me in case I might be missing something back home, and I want to know about it. Number 2, I'll always treat you with the dignity and respect that you deserve as an individual. Whether it's a scheduled meeting in my office or a conversation in the grocery store aisle, you will always have my ear and I will never dismiss you. And I definitely promise not to call you fringy white supremacists. And finally, you'll always know how I'm going to vote because the vote that I would cast in DC is one of the community that elected me. There's no room for personal vendettas or hurt feelings when it comes to casting that vote. It's your vote. It's not mine. Thank you.
Keep in mind, Mr. Yakhour, this is being recorded and you're making campaign promises. Cup of coffee and a cold drink.
Come and get it.
Write it down, folks.
Come and get it.
Okay, let's start with you again, Mr. Yakhour. What is the single most important action you will take as a United States representative, and why is it important to you?
The most important thing is we need to be louder as a party. If I asked you to name 5 Republican members in the U.S. House of Representatives, could you name them off the top of your head? Matt Gaetz, Thomas Massie, and then a whole bunch of others that we don't really know. We need more exposure. We need people that kind of understand the culture, the technology as it evolves. And I don't think we've been doing a good job as that with the leadership in our party lately. So one of the biggest things that I'd like to do is I would like to be a loud voice. I'm a strategic communications major. I would like to use those skills to help bolster the party's messaging, do more commercials, do more media, get the message out there. We have to build this party up or we will not be around in the next few years.
Mrs. St. John.
To me, the biggest thing we're facing, well, there are several things, but the thing that comes to mind first is our First Amendment rights under attack. I've been a speaker. I've experienced this firsthand as an author. I have over 300,000 people that follow me online. And as I came out with conservative points of view, if you came out with anything that questions the liberal narrative or the left, they squash you. They try to take away debate. We need debate in this country. We need to see ideas brought to the floor, right? That's what the parties are doing. We're running on platforms and we're trying to have a free exchange of ideas. And so I believe if we lose our First Amendment rights, we're going to see the rest of the rights are not going to be very far behind it because you won't be able to talk about the loss of your Second Amendment rights if the First Amendment right is stripped away from you. So I believe in Congress, one of the best things that we can do there is be a voice for the Constitution and for what the founders intended this nation to look like, which the left is moving us farther and farther away from with every passing day. And so if I had to name one, I mean, there are so many off the top of my head right now, but that would probably be the top of my list.
Thank you. Mr. Kent.
Election integrity. So a big reason why I'm doing what I'm doing is because of what happened in November of 2020. So I will not let the media or the swamp bully us into saying that the election of 2020 was completely and totally legitimate. Push back on H.R. 1 as strong as we can. I hope to God that that does not become law. If it does, we need to do everything we can to fight it and to fight it on the federal level and the state level. What we can do on the federal level, because every single other check that we were supposed to have on an election, every single person that was supposed to help us adjudicate that, they shirked their responsibility. They hid from it like cowards, and that includes the Supreme Court. So what Congress needs to do at the federal level is to hold a full accountability of the election of 2020, subpoena witnesses, put people on oath, hold people accountable. And that's going to lead to state legislatures seeing the full picture of what's happening with H.R. 1, because H.R. 1 is just a copy and paste of 2020. So that will allow state legislatures to actually have some accountability and to pass some good laws that actually strengthen our election process so that we can all have faith in our Constitution and in our government. So election integrity is first and foremost for me.
Thank you, Mr. Kent. Keep in mind, we are taking email questions to 3cdistrict@gmail.com, and my colleague Hannah Joy has a question.
So this question comes from Tyler. What is your view on unions, especially government employee unions?
I think it's Mrs. St. John's turn to go first.
Well, I can tell you that both of my parents were part of a union, and I've seen the ugly parts of the union, and to me, unions are all about integrity. If you don't have integrity in the union's worthless. We've seen this. My brother-in-law is part of a union right now. He's a longshoreman, and I could sit here for 25 minutes and tell you stories that would make you cry. And so, again, I mean, if you're looking, when we talk about unions or we talk about any kind of government structure, if you don't have people of integrity in positions of authority, it's going to fail. And so you start with a good idea, and then you put someone in there who has no moral underpinning and has no authority, and he's only interested in power, then you're going to wind up with something that is not going to resemble what it started out to be. And so I have a lot of angst. I'm just being honest. I have a lot of angst about the unions, but I do believe, based on what I've seen in my own family, that a lot of this stuff can be remedied if we had people of integrity in these positions of authority and also reining in some of that power. This is certainly true for many of the longshoremen that we see right here in Washington State right now.
Thank you. Mr. Yakhour.
All right, so I was the chief of staff in the executive branch of a federal agency. And I can tell you right now, did you know that about 40% of our federal career workforce is retirement eligible? And they're not going anywhere. And how are we expected to have an efficient government if half the workforce, almost half the workforce, has trouble checking their emails? In a digital age, it's true. So I'm not a fan of the unions. We didn't have one at our agency, and so it made things a little bit easier for us. But I've had conversations with other people who were under the thumb of the union, where you would have a really, really bad employee that could just be doing the worst things you could imagine in the office. And, the union wants you to transfer them to another department so they can go be another person's problem. No, I'm not a fan of unions. I think we need to put more accountability into federal jobs and some of these union jobs and start making more opportunities for some of the younger people to come and step in and do them.
Thank you. Mr. Kent?
So public sector unions, I think, are a scam. I was in the military for 20 plus years. I wasn't allowed to unionize when I was a federal employee because I was in the military. So if you get your paycheck from the federal government or the state government, you shouldn't be allowed to hold your service that we're paying for hostage. The way that our look no further than our teachers' unions. Look at what the teachers' unions are doing right now. They're holding our children's education, our children's social development hostage for a wide variety of reasons we'll get into later. But public sector unions, a scam. Private sector unions, my message to them would be, we are the working class party right now. Are the union leaders that are supporting the Democrats and what the Democrats are doing really on the side of the working people? The Democrats are supporting open borders. That's bringing in a massive influx of illegal immigration. What are those illegal immigrants going to do? They're going to take jobs from working class people. The union bosses that have all these deals of different corporations, the same corporations that haven't been affected by COVID lockdowns, mind you, they're going to employ all these illegal immigrants and undercut the cost of labor. So I have a hard time believing that these private sector labor unions are really Democrats. Really, in fact, the workers are Republicans. And we need to bring them over to our side because our message is economic freedom. So we really need to start calling out the labor union leaders who are supporting the Democrats because the Democrats are the most anti-working class, anti-middle class entity in our society right now.
Thank you. Let's talk for a couple minutes about an issue that affects all of us living here in Clark County. This question came from Kenny Vance, the chief editor of Clark County Today. Regarding the I-5 bridge replacement project, what do you see as the real solution to fixing traffic congestion? And Mr. Kent, I believe it's your turn to go first.
All right. So it's pretty clear that we need a third bridge. The problem, and this is a huge issue that definitely falls right in the federal government's lap because it's interstate. It affects Oregon and Washington. It obviously affects Clark County heavily because there's so many folks that have to commute into Portland. So we need to ensure that we get a good deal on that and that Oregon's not going to just slap up a bunch of tolls that people in Clark County are going to have to pay. I've been pretty disappointed with Representative Beutler's level of participation in this. She had very minimal participation. She got us a measly few million, I don't even think it's a couple $1 million in this whole thing, that we're going to have to pay back by 2025. With the COVID relief bill that they just passed, only 9% of it actually went to COVID relief. The other 91% of it was pet projects. We didn't get a lick of that here. Everybody else got their back scratched. With that COVID relief bill, we could have paid for that bridge numerous times over. So we need active involvement, and we need to actually pick a decent location for it. And I know there's a bunch of different opinions on that, but what we need to do is we need to get all the experts in the same room together, and we need to ensure that the federal government makes sure that Oregon's not going to slap a bunch of tolls and that we actually get what we're paying for and there's enough federal funds allocated. Because look, it's I-5 for God's sakes. It's I-5 and it's I-205. It's not even just Oregon and Washington. This thing affects trade on the entire West Coast. So there's federal funds there. We just haven't had the right representatives that actually go represent us and make the federal government pay for it.
Mr. Yakhour.
Well, what we've learned from the last year with COVID is that you don't need a physical space to run a business anymore. You can telework from home now. So when you see this bridge, it's about project management. And this is one thing where I want to talk to more people in the community because there's so many different views on it. Some people want a bridge, some people don't want the light rail, some people want the light rail. I personally don't want the light rail because I don't want Portland coming in to us. We get enough of that coming in. So I want to talk more to everybody about the bridge and hear them out. But with telework and with technology, you don't have to drive into Portland to work in that office anymore. And frankly, I think we should be looking at ways to eliminate that double tax of working in Portland, living in Washington. I think that's the big issue.
You got one?
So this question comes in from Angela. Oh, I'm so sorry, Heidi. I apologize.
That's okay. I was just going to sit here.
Mrs. St. John.
To me, as someone who owns a business here, we depend on the traffic that comes over from Portland. We absolutely need a third bridge. Anyone who goes back and forth across the interstate can tell you that. What we're seeing happening right now in Clark County is simply bullying by mass transit, right? So they've been doing this for a long time. We watched Jaime Herrera be absolutely ineffectual at it. We need good, reasonable solutions. I agree with Joe. We need to have a very good location. But I think most citizens agree tolls are a bad idea. I think almost everybody in this room would voted against the tolls when it came out several years ago. I would continue to say that's a bad idea. You shouldn't penalize someone because they have to go to work. And also, we believe that in order for us to relieve congestion, Portland doesn't want that, you guys. Portland wants to build taller and taller and taller and cram you into postage stamp size lots and have what happened in Portland in the Metroplex bleed over into Clark County. And one of the ways that we can avoid that is by easing congestion along the 205 and along the I-5 corridor. Once we put that third bridge in, you're going to see a completely different landscape happening, because people that are in Clark County right now or in Camas or Washougal, their commute to Gresham is going to be greatly simplified. And so I'm a fan of a third bridge. I agree with Wadi. I think there needs to be lots of voices, a lot of discussion, but I am sick and tired of being bullied by mass transit. That's what it looks like to me. And I would say put the third bridge in and let's get it done quickly.
Thank you.
So this question comes from Angela. I have an adult son with schizophrenia, now suffers with substance abuse disorder. He can't seem to get help, but the ER does give him clean needles and has even taught him how to use them. Drugs were recently made legal, and it'll be easier for people like my son to fall through the cracks. And my question is, what will you do to help people with mental health and substance abuse issues?
I believe it's Mr. Yakhour's turn to go first.
Thank you. Well, when I went on Lars Larson, this kind of came up briefly, but it comes down to education and how we're educating our kids. We kind of allow the public schools. You know, when I was a kid, we had the DARE program. We'd have a police officer come in and they'd tell us how, you know, one of the older kids would come in and try to give one of the kids a beer and no, and then they'd come in and they'd give you the training. It was great. It was a week-long program. Why don't we do things like that anymore? And that's really where I would go. I'd start with the kids, educate them. With the internet and all the crazy things nowadays, they grow up a lot faster and they try things that maybe they shouldn't be at younger ages. But education in the schools, we should be looking at the school boards to educate our children and keep them from doing these bad things.
Mrs. St. John.
So I agree with Wadi. I think education is part of it, but I think the bigger problem is we need to tell the truth about what's happening with drugs. So the left has stolen the language from us, right? They keep saying we have a homeless problem. I'd like to stand up and say we do not have a homeless problem. We have a drug problem. We have a drug problem. Unless and until we are able to talk honestly about what's happening, that means we have to stop protecting the snowflakes who don't want us to say that we've got drug problems and start addressing it. We can clean up our streets, right? I don't have any faith right now in what our kids are being taught in the education system, in the public education system, and so I don't believe we can leave it up to the schools until we begin to clean the schools up. And so adults, right here, everybody in this room, you guys have an opportunity. Let's stop saying we have a housing crisis. We don't have a housing crisis. We have a drug crisis. And until we start talking honestly about it, and we need to be working with mental health professionals, right? And so when someone needs help, we actually do have programs. I work with many of them. We've worked with them out of the U.S. Digital Outreach Center. We've worked with them in our ministry for over 15 years. There are lots and lots of programs right here in Clark County that people can get help at. But you see the people that are living on the street, they don't want the help, because in order to get the help, they have to say we're ready to get clean. And if they're not ready to get clean, then they're going to live on the street. And then we say, oh, we have a housing problem. No, we have a drug problem. And so we need to be honest about it. And I think moving towards solutions starts with being able to have an honest conversation about drugs and obviously the damage that's being done to our young people.
Thank you. Mr. Kent.
The education is key, like my two fellow candidates up here said as well. But I think something that we have to address in particular here in the Pacific Northwest is the homeless and drug issue. So you can just drive up and down I-5 and you can see, you get close to Portland, Olympia, and Seattle, you can see the homeless folks that are absolutely everywhere. And most of them, they've been given actually a pretty good deal. They get the free drugs, they get the free needles. There's all these incentives, because with those incentives comes a huge infrastructure and a huge business of nonprofits who receive government money and grant money. From the federal perspective, we can't control what the states do in Congress, but we can cut off a lot of this grant money. This grant money that's going to go to a lot of these activist governors and activist mayors who are going to do foolish things like legalize drugs, not enforce any kind of zoning regulation, which also hurts businesses, which hurts homes. There's no reason to have any of these homeless encampments so close to schools, so close to businesses. So we actually need to go in and enforce the law. We can't, at the federal level, we can't make states, cities, and governors do that, but we can withhold funding from those that do. And we can reward police departments, like some of our great sheriffs here in the Third Congressional District who are fighting hard against Inslee. We can reward them with grant money. So I think we really need to exercise the power of the purse in the Congress to enforce some of these.
Thank you. So I have another question, and then it has a follow-up question. The first question is, will you tonight commit to endorse and support the eventual Republican nominee for this race?
Yes.
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 Okay. This is where it's going to get interesting. What if that nominee is named Jaime Herrera Beutler? Mr. Kent,
Yeah, that's going to be a no for me.
Miss St. John?
All right, so this is rough, you guys. We got to be honest, okay? So none of us are going to be happy if Jamie's the girl, all right? That's why we're here. But if you've got somebody who's a complete radical leftist who wants to take away your rights, and we're going to take a bad situation in Washington's 3rd Congressional and make it worse, then if I thought it would make it worse and not better, I would vote for Jaime again. Sorry.
Mr. Yakhour?
So here's the beautiful thing about having multiple candidates this early on with a year and a half to the primary. These are multiple voices spreading the word against Jaime Herrera Beutler.
That's right.
So as long as we're being loud, the message will get out there. But no, I'm not going to endorse her. I'll see y'all in West Virginia if she takes the seat.
Okay, thank you. Votes from independent voters will be crucial to win in the general election. How will you appeal to independents? And let's start with Mr. Yakhour.
Well, my strategy is to be more of the common sense candidate. You know, if you were aligned with President Trump, not necessarily because of his attitude, some people like those we mentioned had a real bad problem with him and his tweets, but his policy was spot on. It was great. So it's reaching out and, you know, I'm not President Trump. I'm willing to have those conversations with those independents and try to bring them back into the party because we need every single base in the district to win this, not just one or two. All Republicans have to unite under one candidate, including us, when the time comes in a year and a half.
Thank you. Mr. Kent.
So in order to win over independent voters, I think we need to really key on the fact that we are the party of the working class and the middle class. So the Democrats left behind the working class and the middle class years and years ago. I think you can really point to it when Joe Biden was the head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and President Clinton at the time signed in the Normalization with China Act. And we started shipping all of our manufacturing overseas. Shortly thereafter, both parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, the Uniparty, started selling us this false bill of goods that shipping our economy overseas was good for us because then we'd have more access to cheap goods, and that immigration was inherently good for our workforce, which cut out working class jobs for hardworking Americans. So the Democrats have doubled and tripled down on this. The Republicans jettisoned it because Trump punched right through it. So we have data on our side now. So there's no, we can argue these hard economic points and we can really point out what Joe Biden and the Democrats are doing right now when they have control of the House and the Senate. Look no further than these last 60 days. Killing off the Keystone Pipeline, killed off thousands of union jobs right away, and we're all feeling it at the pump. Every single business person is. The COVID lockdowns, the reason why the Democrats want to keep the COVID lockdowns going is because it's given them so much control. But they know if they let that control up, people are going to realize that, hey, we can't vote for these clowns anymore. So they have to pass H.R. 1. They have to normalize stealing elections. So if we just point out that the Democrats want to keep you locked down, they want your jobs overseas, they want illegal immigrants taking your jobs, they want to raise your taxes because they know that they're not going to be affected by that. We are the party of the working class. So the more that we point that out and highlight that, the more independent people we're going to win over. Because it's not about Trump. It's not about the 2020 election. In many ways, we can point out the fraud, and I want to expose that. However, the economic issues are what we're going to win on.
Go ahead, Mrs. St. John.
So I agree with both of the gentlemen up here with me. And I'll also add, I think it's very important, again, that we continue to tell the truth. The Democrats are actually making it very easy for us to get to the moderates, as long as we tell the truth about what's happening to our nation. The economic lockdowns, what has happened to our nation in 2020, and now that 2020 is bleeding over into 2021, and our gas prices are going up, we can start talking about the very real economic impact that the Democrats are having. This is devastating policy that is coming out of a Democrat Senate, a Democrat House, and a Democrat White House, the executive branch right now of our government. We can highlight what happens when Republicans who believe in the power of American ingenuity and can unleash, Joe's absolutely right, they want to keep us locked down because they know as soon as they take their foot off of the brakes, because they've literally ground our country to a stop, American ingenuity is going to start going to work again. And we're going to start seeing the lifeblood of this country, which is the working class, come to life. And they are keeping us locked down. As far as I'm concerned, the lockdowns have been criminal, unconstitutional, and somebody needs to go to jail for what they've done to Washington State citizens. I hope that as citizens, we have learned a very difficult lesson. I don't know about you guys, but I know the names of almost all the governors right now. And we didn't know the governors' names before this happened, but we have learned that we have given power. What have we learned? Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. And that is what we have seen. They have crippled our nation. And I don't know about you, but on my watch, I'm going to be as loud as I can to never let this happen again. No one should have the authority to lock down a state the way Inslee has done, the way all of these Newsom and these Kate Brown, for goodness sake. We have been under the thumb of these people. And honestly, I do not think it's going to be hard to get the moderates as long as we talk about the very real facts of what it looks like to be governed by the radical left. I think people are going to be running from it.
So we're going to start with Joe on this question from Gerald. What is your position on right to life and funding abortions with taxpayer money?
So I'm 100% pro-life, and again, the Congress has the power of the purse strings. So we in the Congress may not be able to overturn Roe versus Wade, but what we can do is we can deprive states of federal funding for abortion.
Thank you, Mr. Yakhour.
So when you see the Democrats go on stage at a rally and they like to brag about having abortions, it's the most bizarre thing I've ever seen, but they are doing it. I will not budge on that. I will never budge on that, and I'm with Joe. I will not let, we're not doing any federal funding for abortions. Absolutely not happening.
Thank you, Mrs. St. John.
So my family and I have been involved in the Right to Life movement for many, many years. It is absolutely unconscionable. It's unthinkable to me that we have a man in the White House right now who would sanction the killing of an unborn child up until the moment of birth. And in some cases, even beyond. We're talking about infanticide. So again, I think I agree, obviously, within the Congress is the power of the purse. There are lots of things we can do to withhold federal funding. We're giving grants like sugar out to Planned Parenthood, a disgusting organization that has now infiltrated your schools and is teaching your daughters that abortion is just health care, and they're not talking about the devastation emotionally and physically that abortion has on women. And I think, again, telling the truth, I would like the American people, if we're going to be a nation that wants to talk about abortion, let's actually talk about abortion. Let's talk about what it is. Let's talk about what it does. Let's talk about aborting a baby at 21 weeks and what that looks like. What does abortion mean for a woman after the abortion is over? How does she get post-abortive healing? We have worked with many women over the last 20 years of our life together, my husband and I, and offered post-abortive counseling. I wish that this was being talked about at the federal level. We never talk about the devastation that abortion causes women. What we do see in the mainstream media is my body, my choice, shout your abortion, I love abortion, all of these crazy things. This is wickedness. This is wickedness, and we need to call it what it is.
Thank you. Okay, I've heard a lot of I agree from the three of you tonight.
I think we're friends.
What makes you more qualified for the United States representative than the other candidates on the stage tonight? And let's start with Mr. Kent.
All right, well, I served, like I said, for over 20 years in the United States military. So I did that at every level of special operations. I started out at the very ground level as working class as it gets. I was a private in the infantry, a grunt. Worked my way into Ranger Regiment and then into Special Forces and some other units in special operations. I spent half my career as an enlisted guy on the ground, so labor, and the other half I was a warrant officer. So I was the bridge between labor and management, essentially. So I think that fits very nicely with being a congressperson, because my job is to go talk with everybody in my state, from the smallest level to the most senior level in the state, and take that back to DC and relay the will of the people from the state back to DC. I also know DC very, very well. I was in the intelligence community for a little bit. I served in the CIA. I understand the inner workings of the United States government, what they're capable of, and where certain people can leverage power over certain other people. I understand how all that works. I understand what we need to do to call it out. I understand the military-industrial complex very, very well. I'd like to dismantle that as well. Every place I've served, thank you. Every place I've served, I've had to make very difficult decisions under a good deal of pressure and under a good deal of stress. So losing friends, losing brothers in arms, and having to be under fire constantly has given me a certain appreciation for good leadership and solid leadership and what it takes to actually make hard, decisive decisions. And also, no one has asked me to do this. I saw what Jaime Herrera Beutler did, and I felt called, just like I did after our country was attacked in 9/11. I knew that I had to go and confront what's going on in Washington, D.C. So leadership experience and then individual drive to go take the fight back to D.C.
Okay, Mrs. St. John.
So I have spent the last 30 years of my life raising 7 children, and I've been teaching my children what it means to be an American. My children are familiar with the history of this nation. They're familiar with the Constitution. They've watched me and their father fighting for freedom in this nation here in Washington's Third Congressional District, and also when we travel. I am a nationally recognized speaker. I have a national platform. I've written 7 books, and what those books are talking about is the intersectionality, the intersection really of raising children in the culture right now. Our children are our future. And I want to be a voice for young people. I want to be a voice for parents. I want to be a voice for the young people that have really been forgotten in this race to be the most woke and the most insane that we can possibly be. And it's hurting our children. And if we don't address this right now, if we don't stem the bleeding that's coming from our education system, absolutely federally, it's starting there. Believe me when I say, if we don't begin to do that, we won't have a country to talk about in 15 years, because the students that are coming out of our school systems right now are being taught to hate each other through racist tactics like critical race theory. They're being taught through the 1619 Project that our country is inherently racist and an evil nation. If we don't stem the bleeding, we will not have a voting populace that understands why this nation is so wonderful and why it is worth protecting. My husband and I have also started and are running currently 3 successful businesses. We've started the Firmly Planted Homeschool Resource Center. We've been helping parents have options for education for their children for over 20 years. This time last year, we had 400 students at the Homeschool Resource Center. We currently have over 1,200 students. We had to turn it off because we don't have enough room in our parking lot to take all the students that want to come and experience a different way of education. And so I've been a proven leader. We run a nonprofit organization. I have a lot of drive. I have a lot of passion. I've got a lot of things to say, and I care very deeply about this country, and you can ask any of my kids and they will tell you. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Mr. Yakhour.
All right. Well, in my opening statements, I did say bulletproofed and torture tested, ready for Washington, D.C. But I am the candidate that has worked for President Trump and for his administration. I've spent the last 4 years in D.C. crafting professional networking and relationships to help get the job done a little bit better. On top of that, this job is more about just going to Washington, D.C. and voting. It's about managing multiple offices, building teams, handpicking the people, getting the right people in place to ensure that you're successful. A lot of these people today, a lot of people in Congress, they listen to their 25-year-old staffers and read what's on the... That's not me. As opposed to other candidates, I would be telling everybody how things are going to go instead of them telling me. But it's not just about voting, as I was saying. It's about coming back home. It's about building the base. It's about becoming a louder presence in the district, in the community. It's about all those things. So that's why I think I am the best for this, because I've lived the life a little bit, and I'm ready for it. And I can help, and I can help represent you, and I can get us where we need to be as a party, because we're not there right now.
Thank you. And Hannah has an email question.
This email comes from Leah. Where do you stand on the current movement for police reform, specifically for the 3rd District? We'll start with Mr. Yakhour.
Well, no, you don't know. My mom was a Clark County sheriff for 20 years, and I grew up on the sidelines, watching her come home, and, so when it's police reform and defund the police and all this justification for the abuse of our first responders, which a lot of us see if you watch YouTube or just walk down the street when somebody's pulled over, they're usually cussing at the police. I don't support that. And I want to do everything that I can to help first responders, to give them some of their powers back, to start putting bad people back in jail. COVID, they just started letting them out of the jail. They're all out there in the streets right now. It's time to reform the reform.
Thank you. Mr. Kent.
Yeah, so from the federal level, what the legislature is passing right now, the police reform bill, the George Floyd Act, is incredibly dangerous, and it's just part of this national Democrat movement to demonize the police. So going after qualified immunity for police officers is going to result in police being very, very reactive at best. It pretty much incentivizes our police officers to wait until the call has already gone cold and then just to show up. So it's a threat to our communities. The ban on chokeholds is highly dangerous. It was clearly written by someone who's never been in a violent situation before, trying to critique a violent situation. The biggest thing I can do from the federal level, again, goes back to how we control the grant money. So we can't stop crazy states and people like Inslee from legalizing drugs and from tying our police officers' hands behind their back. But what we can do is we can make sure that good sheriffs like we have here in the 3rd Congressional District get the resources they need. When we have national and somewhat international terrorist organizations like Antifa and BLM running amok in our cities and burning them down, we need to have the ability for the federal government to step in when mayors and governors don't do their job. So we need to empower federal law enforcement to treat Antifa and BLM like the terrorist organizations they are. Charge them with terrorism, target their funding, and if requested, we need individual sheriffs to be able to make the request to have federal troops come reinforce them. That shouldn't come from these cowardice mayors and governors.
Thank you. Mrs. St. John.
So I, like the rest of you, have been very frustrated to watch as Antifa and BLM burn our cities down with impunity, and our cowardly Republicans who we have elected to represent us go to Washington, D.C. and do not back the people that are putting their lives on the line. These are our first responders, and we can give them the support that they need. I agree with Joe, through grant money. We control who gets that money and who doesn't. We control who is designated in a certain way. And when we see, I don't know about you guys, but I was watching during the election, during 2020, and we're watching during a pandemic, BLM right here in Portland, and they're burning our cities down. They're trying to get over into Vancouver, and they're threatening to come over here. And what are we doing? We're being very quiet, and we're being, frankly, very cowardly. I don't know many people who would risk their lives to protect their communities, but the police officers and the first responders do it every single day. And they need our respect, and they need our support. And I think if they felt like they got it, things might look a little bit different on the ground. And so as a person who would be interested in making a difference in that from a federal level, I say we look at the bigger picture. We decide, where's the money going? Where can we give the most support to that would make the most difference? If it's the sheriffs, then they need funding. Then they need funding. And they also need to give a bully pulpit to these guys so they can get out there and say, this is what's actually happening. Again, you see the mainstream media pushing a narrative, and we're not even giving our first responders the opportunity to say, no, this is actually what happened on the ground. And so I would like to see the narrative change again. again. I'm going to keep going back to it. I think the language has been hijacked by the left, and we have been too quiet, and we have allowed them to do it. And so I think part of our job in Congress would be to go and give a voice to the first responders and shine a light on what's actually happening so that we can do something about it.
Thank you. And we have another question from Hannah.
So this is kind of a conglomeration of several questions. We're going to start with you, Mr. Kent. Every summer, hundreds of acres burn due to wildfires. It seems our government can't seem to manage our forests properly to prevent the fires. And how do you plan on helping rural citizens with environmental overreach by the state, especially a logging industry?
Yes, we need to deregulate the timber industry. So the biggest problem we've had is that we've had the federal government come in, seize up federal land under the guise of environmental protection and say that we can't log this. So that's deprived us of our ability to keep people in rural communities because they can't earn a living there. So then they have to leave these communities dry and die for no good reason. And then we see these forests become incredibly overgrown. The logging roads aren't maintained, the trails aren't maintained. And then we have a hot summer like we had last 2 summers, and we see massive amounts of wildfire. So we need to have the ability to get the federal government out of land management as much as they are. We need to let the timber industry get back in there, bring back our jobs, responsibly log, and make sure we're getting rid of all this undercut growth. And the thing is, I think the left knows this. They know that. They want to force us all into cities. They want to kill off the rural industries because they're independent, and they want to force us to go live in pods in Portland because that's easier for them to manage. So we need to call that out and revitalize our timber industry and bring back those jobs. And then that's going to bring back responsible forest management and cut down heavily on the wildfires.
Thank you. Mrs. St. John.
So I'm a huge fan of reforestation. My grandfather worked for the Forest Service, and in fact, he and my grandmother lived in a treehouse looking for planes during the Second World War. And so he was always talking to me when I was very young about the importance of reforestation. And what we've seen happen in the last 40 years is environmentalists come in and really, let's be honest, environmentalism, particularly here in the Pacific Northwest, is more of a religion than it is a science. And so what we see is people looking at environmentalism, and instead of looking, we care more about pigeons than we do about people. We're not clearing off the underbrush, which is so dangerous, as Joe just pointed out. The reason why we're having these fires is because our forests are not being properly managed. Why are they not being properly managed? Because we've got people who worship at the altar of environmentalism coming into our cities and saying, we don't want you here. We want to see the trees. We don't want the people. Forget that you've lived there your entire lives. Forget that your family has always made a living off of that land, and that is land that you have owned until the federal government came and illegally and criminally stole it out from underneath you in the name of keeping our environment beautiful. There is a way for us to keep our environment beautiful. I love this area as much as you do. Most of us love when we're having a bad day. What do? I drive up Highway 14. I go up to see the gorge. We love it here. This is why we live here. It's beautiful. We love our trails and we love our forests, and we want to keep them healthy, and we want them to be here for generations. And there is a way to manage our forests in a way that is both environmentally sound and economically viable. And we need to marry those two things together. And I think we can do it without walking down this crazy road. I was just talking to some of the women in Skamania, and they were telling me that the Forest Service has actually come in and destroyed the roads into the forest. So if there's a fire, you can't even get to it. That's criminal. Why are we doing that? We've got big questions, and we need to find the answers. And I think there's a way for us to begin to reforest our beautiful Pacific Northwest responsibly.
Thank you.
I frankly am excited about it.
Mr. Yakhour.
You guys stole my thunder. All right, well, I think everything has been said about that. So I'm in full support of the timber industry. I'm in full support of deregulation. We have to get the federal government off our private property. We have to start downsizing our federal government. And the first thing that I can think of is the EPA. We should abolish the EPA. That'll solve a lot of our problems.
Thank you. Okay, we have time for just about 2 more questions. And the next 2 questions have to do with Republican Party leadership in the 3rd Congressional District is worried about retaining the seat in Republican hands. Republican Party leadership is worried that if 3 candidates go up against the incumbent in the primary, the incumbent may win, and we're worried about maybe losing the seat in the general election. So my question is this. The first reporting date for fundraising is tomorrow. It's going to be a public record. Are you willing to share with us tonight how much money you've raised to date and from how many unique supporters? And let's start with Mrs. St. John.
Wow. This is so exciting. So we've actually been doing very, very well. We just had a kickoff event over at Firmly Planted. We had about 400 people show up to that. As I checked right before I came here tonight, I've currently raised right around $125,000. And so we're moving well toward the goal that we have. It's going to take, from what I understand, it's going to take $4 million. The Democrats are talking about throwing an awful lot of money at this race. So we're talking about, from what I'm understanding, they're talking about throwing $10 million at it. They smell blood in the water, and they want to flip the seat. But we have a lot of support on the ground. As I said, I have been working in this district for 15 years, all up and down the I-5 corridor in Klickitat County and Skamania County. We've got a lot of communities there that we have already been working in. And so our ground game is strong, and we're going to continue to move forward.
Thank you. Mr. Yakhour.
Oh. All right, well, I won't admit that Mrs. St. John is trouncing me in fundraising right now. She's doing a great job. No, she's doing a great job. It's actually kind of funny because I think all 3 of us were forced to kind of run a little earlier than we wanted to. It would have been nice to take a couple months off, but this is a campaign and it's serious. So let's see, in the 30 days I've run, I've probably raised about, don't quote me on this, about $35,000, $40,000. But I've also put $25,000 of my own money into this campaign, and that's how serious I am in winning this seat. But at the same time, it's up for you to decide, not me. But I do want to remind everybody, this early on, with a year and a half to the primary, fundraising should not be the number one thing that we look for in a candidate. No offense, Mrs. St. John, you're wonderful.
None taken.
Okay, fantastic. Because if we look strictly at one single base and we try to go outside that base, we might have trouble getting votes. So it's not about fundraising, it's about, well, that's a little bit of it. But it's about fundraising, it's about viability, it's about getting the vote, it's about being able to go take on the primary, it's about going to the general and taking on the Democrat and winning that. And then it's about using the seat effectively. So if we talk about fundraising with a year and a half and who can raise the most on, now you have to raise even more, and you have to raise even more, and you have to raise even more every single month. And I'm not going to put myself in a fundraising crunch with a year and a half to make this thing happen. We'll see the numbers go up as we go. I'm not worried about that. We'll see some good fundraising numbers, and we'll see some great endorsements here in the next few months. But until then, we got a year and a half. So,
Thank you. Mr. Kent.
So I'm not sure how many individual contributors I have exactly. So we've raised ballpark of 50 grand, and then I've put up 200,000 of my own dollars for this campaign. So I plan on going all in and going all out. So
Thank you. Okay, another metric that will be used by party officials, by Republican voters, is the support of former President Trump. If former President Trump endorses someone else in this race, will you drop out and endorse that person? And let's start with Mr. Yakhour.
that would be really bad for me. I mean, I spent the last 4 years working for the guy, but you know what? At the same time, I would respect that decision. He is the former president. If he sees something...
I think he might be popular still in the Republican Party.
I think we got some Trump fans in here. But if he sees something in another candidate that we may not even have met yet, I will. I'll go with the president, and I will fully endorse that individual.
Thank you. Mr. Kent.
yeah, same. I mean, if President Trump's going to put his weight behind one of the people that's up here on the stage, I'll back them. I think President Trump wants to see who's going to work the hardest for it. That's just my personal opinion. So, yeah, I would back whoever the president
Thank you very
wants.
much, Mrs. St. John.
Yeah, I think everyone can agree. I mean, we're all Trumpians up here, every single one of us. So I think we can agree that whoever President Trump endorses is going to kind of suck the oxygen out of the room for everybody else. So I think that, my plan is to get the endorsement. But in lieu of getting the endorsement, I would back whoever did. So I believe I think that's the wise thing to do.
Thank you very much. Okay. Let's finish. Sure. We have time for one more, Hannah. Go ahead.
I really like this one. Would all three candidates be willing to face a Republican-only runoff election before the primary election and abide by those results in order to reduce the vote splitting that could otherwise occur? This was presented by Sue Cole-Peterson.
And we'll start with Mr. Kent.
As long as Dominion's not adding it up, yeah.
Mrs. St. John?
That's an interesting idea. I think it leaves out the fact that I'm assuming that what's going to happen is we're going to start to see a candidate rise to the top. I think we're going to start to see endorsements come in. I think we're going to start to see momentum. One of the three of us is going to start to have momentum, and it's going to become apparent. And so I don't feel like I can answer that question because it feels like too much of a hypothetical to me. And I think when I get there, I would take the advice and counsel of the people that are around me, but I'm not willing to stake my life on it right now.
Thank you. Mr. Yakhour.
Same thing. I don't really have an answer. We'll see what happens, but...
Okay. Let's finish with something fun.
Oh, good.
And we're going to start with Mrs. St. John on this one. Tell us something about yourself that the average person in this audience does not yet know.
I'm the most public figure of anyone up here. There's nothing you guys don't know. I can't think of anything. I was raised, and one of the things I like to tell people is I spent a lot of time in Boring, Oregon, and then the Lord moved me from Boring to Battleground, and it's not lost on me.
Thank you, Mr. Yakhour.
No, I'm on the spot. I'm the same way. I tell everybody everything about myself. I don't know. I love to play the guitar. If you guys need a backup guitarist in your band, let me know.
Thank you, Mr. Kent.
Yeah, I feel like I've been pretty public lately. Growing up right here in the Pacific Northwest, I was heavily involved in the Boy Scouts. I'm an Eagle Scout, proud Eagle Scout, and I really want to get a good, strong scouting community here for my boys. So that's something I really enjoyed and still am very proud of.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, I'd like to invite to the stage Mr. David Gallati, Executive Director of Activate Republicans.
All right, guys, just really quick before we wrap up here for the night. We've had a lot of great questions, and some of you want to get involved in these campaigns and get to know the candidates a little bit better. There is an amazing, massive tent on the side of this building. It's warm, it's light, and we are going to send the candidates all out to the tent and take about 30 minutes to try to meet and greet with all you guys. So don't just run off. Just go and make your way out to the tent if you want to take a little bit more time this evening to get to know your candidates. On top of that, please, after this, go to clarkrepublicans.org, hit the volunteer donate button, get involved, whatever you can do to make a difference starting tonight. And we look forward to seeing you next month when we do the training event. Hope to see everybody there. I think we're going to outgrow this room pretty soon. I think we're almost there. So we may be looking for a larger location, or we may just move out to the tent. But again, thank you guys for coming.
Thank you. And that concludes our candidate forum tonight. I want to thank again the three candidates for participating. Thank you, Hannah Joy, for helping moderate and screening questions. I'd like to thank and Mr. Josiah Joner for being our great timekeeper. I'd like to thank all the volunteers who helped set up and help put on this great event. We couldn't have done it without you. Thank you to Church on the Rock for letting us use the facilities. And by the way, if you're looking for a great church, the Sunday service starts at 11 a.m. Last of all, but not least, Thank you all for coming. The political process needs people that care about the future of our great nation, and I encourage you to get involved. We're all just regular people that care about our country and want to help our children and grandchildren have a great place to live, work, and enjoy life. Go out and find your favorite candidate in the tent and get your picture taken. Sign up to be a volunteer. Please drive safe. Good night. God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.